Drustenloch was a half-turn of the moon away, even when moving at a fast pace. Eijlam and Fionna were well matched in stride and stamina, and the roads were dry. There were fewer trees as they traveled across the river into the Lunto Plains. Fionna was excited and a little scared as they drew closer to her papa's home. She needn't have worried, because Farghal was there waiting for her. Fionna cried out in joy as she ran up the path to greet him. "Papa!" But she was a bit taken back at the sight of him. Fionna hugged and kissed her papa on the brow as she always had. "Yes, my girl." He knew he had grown frail. "The magic is going out of the kingdom. Can you not feel it?" Farghal asked as he gave her a light hug. Fionna was shocked at how thin he felt in her embrace. "You have grown old, Papa." Fionna looked concerned. "With the loss of the elves, the subtle magics are flowing away as well. Man dominates and we are but relics of the past," Farghal muttered as he led them inside. "You are a welcome sight for my old eyes." He turned and looked at the couple with a huge grin under his whiskered face. "We are betrothed," Fionna told him. "I am glad to hear it." The old wizard warmly took them by the hands and inspected the matching gold rings they shared. Soon weariness overshadowed the fuss of their greeting. Farghal seemed to shrink a bit as he lost his strength to continue standing. "Come, let us sit," Fionna directed him to his comfortable chair by the hearth. "We have come to ask for your wisdom," Eijlam quickly said. "There is a dragon that is moving in on us to the north. We think something or someone controls this monster and fear the worst. Can you help us?" Farghal debated something in his mind before he spoke. "I have heard rumors. I hoped they were not true. The elves are gone, taking with them their power and wisdom, and common men have been driven mad by their own divisiveness. I have heard of a religion of sorts. I believe the name for this invention is shadow cult. They worship the darkness of the fallen one, old Lord Sermanos himself." "Gods, no!" Fionna blurted out, her eyes wide in horror. "That is right, my dear. There is nothing to stop them now with the subtle magics leaving us." Farghal sadly shook his head. "The wizards were called to leave this realm, Fionna. I should not be here." Farghal stuttered. I think I must be the only one left who stayed. I stayed behind for your sakes. I am now made mortal. Without the strength of my brother wizard's bond, I'm dying." Farghal sat there exhausted. Fionna fell crying into his lap. "Papa, no!" Farghal lovingly stroked Fiona's hair to console her. "Eijlam," the wizard confessed, "I brought you two together for a purpose. There is some part of the song in the great plan that includes you in all this, my boy." Farghal coughed. It was as if hands from another realm tightened around his throat. "I do not see clearly exactly why. Fionna, she is here to help you, where I cannot. My days have become numbered." As an immortal being, Farghal was distressed, but he was also fascinated at feeling mortal life slip away. His transition back to Ilmatar was not supposed to happen like this, but the lords had cursed him somehow. He could feel his body decay. It was the price for his insolence in defying their call. The clamor and distraction of EJ and Fiona's arrival made it harder to hang on, and he knew he did not have much time left. "Tell me everything you know," Eijlam said calmly as he watched Fionna in the throes of grief. It cannot get any worse than this, EJ thought to himself. Oh wow, something is up, and Farghal is paying a dear price for it. I am your author-narrator, Karleigh, and this is Tales of Eldalorn Book 1, Chapter 29, Unraveled. Farghal wove for them the whole tapestry of their lives, both seen and unseen as he knew it. He told them what he had made in his house that would help them. He had a recipe book of curatives and a whole cabinet full of salves and poultices that he had prepared for them. These work to heal, and these repel fire. These let you breathe underwater. He told them many secrets as he found the energy to rise up out of his chair. Show your cloth blanket to Nolan. He looked kindly into Fionna's puffy eyes. She will know what to do with it. Everything Fionna heard with her ears was confused by misery, and she could barely grasp any of it. She helplessly nodded, promising to show the tiny blanket to Nolan. Take my master's staff, Fionna. It is ancient and far more powerful than the one you have. It will help you and keep you safe. This is for my own peace of mind. Farghal sadly looked into Fionna's eyes, trying to convey the feelings he had for the only daughter he'd ever known. She began to understand these moments with him were his last. In revealing this, he diminished even further. Fionna became a crutch under her papa's arm as he grew too weak to stand on his own. And there are protective runes. Scatter them where you camp and become invisible, Farghal told them, pointing at shelves as they slowly walked to his sleeping room. Be sure to take all these things with you, Farghal said as he lay down to rest. Fionna and EJ knelt at the edge of the bed. She held her papa's hand as he struggled to speak. It was my joy to see the fiery light of your eyes shining in all my days. My beautiful tangle-haired elven girl, I am truly privileged to know you. Both of you. The old wizard could speak no more. He had saved up the last of his mortal energy to be there, just for them. With those final words, Master Farghal took his last breath and died. Savo, hîdh and gurth, Mellon Ithron. Eijlam sadly blessed the old wizard's passing in the way of the Edilith. Tears stained both their faces. It was nearing the hour of sunrise. Eijlam felt he had to get out of the house, into the woodlands for a while, to clear his head. He took Fionna's hand to lead her down to the riverside path where they used to walk. Through the garden was the stable where they once played with Daisy, the little white pony. They found 2 larger horses in the fence munching hay. It is a good thing we found them here before we left, EJ said soberly. Fionna stroked the closest one on its shoulder. It turned its head and nuzzled her on the cheek before going back to the business of eating. Do you think we need to make any special arrangements in the capital to bury Papa? Fionna started to cry again. We will ask around later in the morning, EJ said, softly hugging her to himself. The sun lingered over the river in beautiful shades of pink and orange. The two sat in silence as they felt the cool shadows of the night melt away. Eijlam put his arm protectively over Fiona's shoulder as they walked back to the house. Much to their horror, Master Farghal's body had disappeared. I hope some madman did not take him. Fionna choked on her words as her eyes flooded with tears again. I am sure the lords of Ilmatar came for him. He is one of their own, after all. EJ tried to sound confident. The trouble was, this whole visit was confusing. EJ had no time to think on all that he had heard. To him, none of it made sense. At the moment, he was busy helping Fionna with her grief, and he too felt sickened at the loss of the old wizard. But Eijlam had to be the strong one this time. Nothing in the house is touched. So it was not men who came here, EJ said after inspecting the place more closely. You are right. No one could have been inside the cottage but us. Fionna remembered the enchantments on the property that would hide the place if there was some danger. She shook her head sadly and began to collapse in grief again. EJ reached out to hold her up. Fionna, there is no hurry. There is no hurry to leave, EJ said tenderly to her as he hugged her warmly to himself. We will consider going back after a night of rest. EJ softly spoke. He stroked her long hair, trying to comfort her as she clung sobbing on his shoulder. Fionna felt a little better after Eijlam made them both some breakfast. She didn't think she was hungry, but was surprised at how much they both ate. It had been a long, hard run to get there, and they hadn't replenished their energy since they had arrived. Master Farghal was so desperate to talk, they had forgotten all else. Finally, having the time to look around, the two thought the rooms seemed smaller and less vibrant than they remembered. The table that was under the tree outside was now dry and splintered. Hear the bird song? EJ said as a flock of tiny birds flew down to the fence to look at him. They quickly flew up into that tree. I think they remember you, EJ, Fionna said. Fionna liked the sound of their happy chirping. The couple went into the bathhouse, and this time Fionna let Eijlam remove her clothes as they prepared to bathe in the large pool. How silly I was as a child when you met me. She got a distant look on her face, remembering those times. You are a wizard, my love. You were not raised as Edeleth. They sat down deep in the water together. I think I would like to try that pipe again, EJ whispered supportively. You told me it was a wizard ritual, tradition. This seems to be one of those times. Fionna smiled weakly at him, feeling him tickling her leg under the water. That wasn't your fingers. Fionna feigned an accusation as she glared at him. Eijlam looked innocent as she lightly splashed water in his face. For a fleeting moment, Fionna seemed her old self. You know, Fionna, EJ spoke soberly, his wet eyelashes blinking as he moved closer. I miss this home too. Their eyes narrowed as they moved together for a serious kiss. Fionna and Eijlam had taken their time, just being together and reminiscing memory, until it was time for the evening meal. Afterward, they sat by the old hearth fire. Farghal's chair sat glaringly empty. Fionna was packing her pipe as she wistfully said, "It has been so long. How is it I did not notice the years passing?" Fionna lit the pipe with a tiny burning stick from off of the mantel and puffed lightly. "You are Eidolith, Fionna. Time is different for our kind. It flows even faster for mortals." He was trying to understand it himself as Fionna passed him the pipe. He looked down at the thing in his hand as if it was going to bite him in the face. "We should ask Ro about it. He and Nolan have lived throughout all time. They fought in the wars and were both present at the fullness of the elven kingdoms." EJ put the pipe to his lips. "I cannot even imagine it," he said while trying not to choke on the leaf smoke he just inhaled. "It is still a foul thing," he said to himself, trying in vain not to scowl at the pipe. Fionna chuckled at seeing his eyes water. She never indulged in this tradition anymore anyway. Today was a remembrance time at her papa's hearth. She was thankful EJ was there to share this ritual with her, such as it was. Fionna did not feel so alone in her grief. "We are still like elflings in our knowledge and emotions, Fionna. How we manage at all in this realm is a wonder," Eijlam added as he handed her back the pipe. "We have had to learn our lessons fast in this life to survive them," Fionna spoke, feeling the weight of how much had changed since they first met. The hearth was cozy that night despite the sadness that permeated their hearts and minds. Hand in hand, they went to find some rest. None of the beds seemed comfortable or large enough for the two of them, and they didn't want to sleep in the wizard's bed, so they lay down on the soft grass under the stars and the old tree outside. Eijlam looked at the silhouette of Fionna lying on the cool grass next to him, and this time he didn't have to stop himself from lovingly caressing her body. She turned over to look at him, and it was as if all time and distance from this place faded away. "I am glad you talked me into staying," Fionna said. "I needed to feel grounded. I did not leave here in a good way the first time, and I would not want to do that again." EJ leaned over and kissed her gently as he pillowed her head on his arm. They silently watched the stars moving through the sky as they fell asleep. As morning came on the next day, EJ and Fionna loaded the horse packs with the gear and the items they thought important enough to bring back to Velavar. The couple walked as they led horses in hand. The journey back to the fort would be a whole pass of the moon, possibly longer for them at this slower pace. "We should ride," Eijlam finally said, after plodding along for a while. "The trail takes too long, and we should rest in case of trouble," he added. Of course, he was right. On the fourth day of travel, some men tried to rob them. "Ugh, I suppose they think we are helpless children," Fionna growled, her eyes flashing as she leapt down off her horse. Before the other bandits even realized she dismounted, Fionna easily severed the closest man's thick leather weapon belt with her dagger. She glared all wild-eyed at the man's recoiling face. Fionna neatly marked his cheek with her razor-sharp blade. A thin line of blood ran in droplets down the length of his neck, onto his shoulder as the man stood frozen in terror at the sudden sight of her. The other would-be assailants instantly took off for the hills. They were screaming in high-pitched wails as they ran. The one whose belt she'd cut turned and ran away with the others, his trousers dragging, sword clanking. EJ howled at the sight of his naked backside, trying to outrun the others. Fionna, you did not even let them say one word. EJ was chuckling so much he could hardly speak. Still perched on top of his horse, he almost rolled off. EJ's frantic grasping for the pommel made Fionna laugh. My brave Fionna, my red-headed warrior, I am feeling my blood heat to boiling, having witnessed such power. EJ crooned at her. His eyes started to water from laughing so hard. Fionna smiled wickedly at EJ as she gathered her horse's reins. I am glad to see you smile again. He softly grinned, trying to contain his laughter as he wiped his eyes. We just do not have time for this. I am already tired of the road, Fionna said, pretending to act sulky. But as their eyes met, she burst into roaring laughter with Eijlam. She had surprised herself. It was a small release from all the seriousness of the last few days. Fionna mounted her horse in one smooth motion, and they took off galloping to leave the incident far behind. Fionna is right. They have had to learn to adapt to everything the hard way because they don't have elders to lead them. Fionna was raised in the city among humans, and she doesn't have that same unmoving safety net of long-lived traditions that the elves live by. Maybe that's why she makes such a good leader. She keeps them on their toes. Maybe that's why Farghal thought she would be so important to Eijlam's life. And though the wizard is gone, he is still immortal. What plans the lords have for the wizards, we don't know. You will just have to listen in for the rest of the story, so we'll see you next week. And don't forget to share with your friends. Tales of Eldalorn. Elvish lesson of the day. Savo, hîdh, gurth, Mellon Ithron. EJ was simply saying goodbye to an old friend when he said, "Have peace in death, friend wizard." You may remember Galadriel calling Gandalf Ithron in Lord of the Rings. And now as the light bulb goes on in your head, you know what she was saying. Simply wizard. Not simply, I mean just wizard. Ithron is wizard. Savo, hîdh, gurth, Mellon Ithron.